Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Albert. So today I'm going to share a video. I'm going to show you how to implement RBAC on AWS. It's going to be a very short video. I know that RBAC is a term in the cloud security space where everybody in cloud security, everybody in the IAM space know what an RBAC is. So today I'm going to take my time to explain what an RBAC is, how you can implement RBAC on AWS, and I'm also going to do a hands-on lab on AWS for you to see how you can define permissions and how you can assign roles to users on AWS. All right. So, meaning of RBAC. So I got this definition from Aws Iam, and it's a very nice definition that Aws Iam put on their website. I really like this definition. That's the reason why I went ahead to pick this definition. So it says that RBAC is a role-based access control. The RBAC simply means role-based access control. So role-based access control refers to the idea of assigning permissions to users based on their role within an organization. So yes, so RBAC policy defines the permissions that a user is supposed to have based on their role that a person is going to play in organization. So you are in an organization, for example, you have network engineers. Network engineers, they have their role as network engineers. We can specify the permissions that they need to perform their job in organization. We have the HR guy, the HR people. The HR can be a role that people assumed those roles and then they perform certain functions in organization. So you can specify that I want the HR people to have access to this and that. Let's say A, B, C, D. Now, you can also limit their functions, their permissions, so that they cannot get access to certain resources in organization. So that's what it means, that signing permissions to users based on their role within an organization. If you bring it to AWS, one of the things is that when you can create a role on AWS, you assign those roles to users, and then you define the access that they should have, the permissions. So you create a policy on AWS, and then you define what those users can do. So I'm just using a network engineers. Let's say we have the network administrator role. You create a role, you attach a policy, but you define the policy. Policies actually are permissions that allow or that give access to users to perform functions on AWS. So you define whatever those network administrators can do on AWS, right? So it says that it offers a very simple, manageable approach to access management that is less prone to error than assigning permissions to users individually. Yes, so RBAC really helps because sometimes you can create a rule, for example, like a network administrator role, and then you assign different users to that role. When you assign different users to those roles, they assume the permission that has been attached to that role, right? So when using RBAC for role management, you analyze the needs of your users and group them into roles based on their common responsibilities. Yes. So one good thing about RBAC is that whenever you are implementing an RBAC policy on AWS, one of the things is that, for example, let's say you are managing thousands of users in organization. Let's say your company has like 10,000 users or 10,000 employees. And let's say you have the network administrators. You can look at what is their responsibility, because as an IAM consultant or as an IAM engineer, you can look at what the responsibility of those network engineers in organization. So you can check whether their responsibilities are actually exactly the same thing, or let's say they have different responsibilities. So normally you can create a role based on common responsibilities. So for example, let's say 15 network engineers in organization, and all those network engineers, they do exactly the same thing. So what you can do is that you should not just go ahead and then create a role and then be giving those permissions to the users individually. No, there are two things. What you can do is that you can create a role and then you attach a policy, the permissions to the role. Then you can assign those roles to the users on AWS, or you can assign those the role to the users in organization. So whenever the users assume those roles, what is going to happen is that because the policies or the permissions have already been attached to the role, they also assume and then take over the permissions to perform the job function that they want to perform. So as an IAM network engineer, as an IAM engineer, one of the things that normally I say is that sometimes whenever you are working in a very large environment, you need to really look at what is the job responsibility of those users, and then you can create those roles and then implement RBAC policies in organizations to help the organization. So normally, as an IAM engineer, one of the things that you're going to do, or one as part of your job, is that you're going to work with different managers, right? We call them the cross managers, and then you're going to look at what is the job roles of those of the employees, and this is really going to help you to define the roles that you can create and then assign those roles to the users, right? All right. So then you can assign one or more rules to each user and one or more permissions to each user. Yes. So one thing is, for example, let's say you have an employee who is called Lear. Now, Lear is a network engineer, but at the same time, we can also give an S3 role to Lear. So we give a network administrator role to Lear. At the same time, we give an S3 administrator role to Lear. But based on these roles, we can limit the permissions of S3 and then assign it to Lear, right? So that is how this one is. So this is also another definition, and it says that role-based access control is a method of protecting sensitive data from improper access, modification, addition, or deletion. Yes, whenever you implement a role-based on AWS or in organization, what happens is that you try to protect sensitive data, right? So for example, let's say if somebody, let me just use a typical work environment. If somebody is working, let's say, as a help desk, the person responsibility has been defined, so the person does not have the permission to view or to look at the person does not have the permissions to look at certain documents in the HR department. Yes, you do not have those permissions. I don't know whether you've seen this before. Sometimes when you go to the bank, right? Like when you go to the bank, there are certain rooms that they have notice there. They have the notice at the door which says that employees only. Or sometimes they can say that managers only. So if you're not a manager, you don't have access to those rooms. So that is basically RBAC there. So it's only people who have permissions can enter those rooms, right? So basically, yes, they are very sensitive. Every company has very sensitive data or sensitive information in an organization. So whenever you are implementing RBAC, it helps because it's going to restrict people from getting access to certain resources. So like, for example, it's going to prevent people from deletion. Whenever you implement RBAC on AWS, when you specify the permission that a person is supposed to have to do their job, for example, let's say you have a lot of files, a lot of document on Amazon S3, and then you give a full S3 access or an S3 administrator role to some users, you can define the permission. Right, you can define the permission and say that, well, you can have a full access to the S3 bucket, but what I'm going to do as an IAM engineer, as an IAM consultant, or as an IAM manager is that I'm going to take away the permission to delete S3 bucket. And I'm going to show you an example. So you can define the permission and say that, well, I don't want you guys, I don't want this group people or this group of people to have the ability to delete an S3 bucket, but you can have the permissions to create a bucket, to read a bucket, to view a bucket, to check a bucket, or to create a bucket versioning, to list bucket, or all that kind of stuff. But you guys will not have the permission to delete or even modify any document that is in the S3 bucket. So RBAC is very, very important. All right, so it allows employees to have access to the information required to fulfill their responsibilities, and also access right permissions are given to employees based on their job roles and designation. This helps protect critical data against misuse. Yes, if you are in a security environment, you know that protection of data is very, very important. You know, I have been in a security space for a while, and I know how sensitive certain data can be. And then, as a security person, you have to, be on the more lookout so that people who do not have the access to certain resources will not have access to resources, or else you might end up doing something that can cause a whole problem for the organization, right? So we are looking at what is a role. What is a role? Because we look at RBAC and we're talking about the role you are given access based on your roles. What is a role? So essentially, a role is a collection of permissions that you can apply to users. It's a collection of what permissions that you can apply to users. So whenever I create a role, so for example, I can create an S3 administrator role, right? And with the S3 administrator role, I can create a policy which has the permissions, and I can define the policy and say that, well, like an example I gave earlier, I don't want you guys to be able to delete. So anybody who's going to assume or take the role as an S3 administrator, the person will not be able to delete any resources in S3 bucket. Or for example, I can give an administrator role to some users in organization or on AWS, and I can define the permissions and say that, well, I don't want anybody who takes over this role to be able to delete users or create account or create user account. But you can have this role and have this permission to do other stuffs, right? So using roles makes it easier to add, remove, and adjust permissions than assigning permissions to users individually, which is great. So as a user, as your user base increases in scale and complexity, roles becomes very, very useful. Yes, whenever you have the administrator role. So for example, let's say you have 10 developers in let's say 20 developers in organization. All these developers, you can create a role called the developers role, and then you can assign this role to all the developers in the organization. Then the next thing is that you can specify the permissions that these people can have access to certain resources on AWS. When you do that, whenever there is some changes or whatever, some issue or something like that you need to make, any modification that you want to make, you do not need to check check up on individuals. You just have to go to the role, look at the permissions, and then you can redefine or modify the permission that is attached to that role. If you don't do that, and then you decided, okay, fine, you are going to attach permissions to each user one by one, is not really going to help. It's not going to help. What is actually going to happen is that whenever there's an issue or whenever you want to do some certain modification, you have to go to each individual's user account and start modifying those permissions. But if you have a role, the permissions or the policy is attached to the role on AWS. You can easily go to the role and check the permissions and then modify the permission immediately. Whenever you save those modifications, what is going to happen is that it's going to apply to everybody or every user or every developer that you assign that role to. So it becomes more easier for you to do it, right? So let's say we have this guy here. Let's say this guy is administrator. Now, we can, when we hire this guy to be administrator, what we can do is that one, we can create a policy, right? A policy with permissions. And then when we create a policy, what we can do is that we don't have to apply the policy to this guy straight up. But what we can do is that we can create a role called the admin role, and then attach the policy to the admin role and assign it to this user on AWS. Now, the policy that we create would define what this person can do on AWS. So, for example, I created this policy, and when you look at this policy very well, it says that the person, this administrator, let me call this guy James. So James here, who's an administrator and has the admin role, this is the policy that has been attached to the role. So when you look at this policy here, or this permission here, now James has the permission here to get roles in IAM. So he can go into IAM and then get a role. He has an S3 list jobs permission. So James, this administrator here, or inside this admin permission that I've created, the admin role permission that I've created here for James, this administrator, he has the permission to list jobs, to list IAM roles, to create a bucket. So you can see that here, he can create a bucket on S3. He can list a bucket on S3. He can list users policy on IAM. He can create a user on IAM. He can create access keys on IAM. He can get object in S3. He can add users to groups. He can list he can list sample provider tags, and then he can get user, create job in S3, delete object in S3. But you can see that here, all this policy has been defined. So even though he can delete object, but he cannot delete a bucket. There's a difference between deleting an object and then deleting a bucket. So the other thing is that you can see that here on the IAM, this administrator here, or in this role, he's able to create a user, but he cannot delete a user. So when he creates a user, he will not be able to have he doesn't have the permission to delete the user. At the same time here, he cannot delete an object, but if he's trying to get an object from S3, he can. So here you can see that based on his role as an administrator, I have defined the policy. I have defined what he can do in organization. It's just example, like coming to like bringing it into the organization setting. When you see that, when in every organization, when you look at the front desk people, there is no way a front desk person can have access to the IDF. It's not possible. Or the server room. There is no way a front desk person will have access to, let's say, if the organization is using, let's say, Microsoft 365, Microsoft 365. There is no way a help desk person will have permissions to get to access the administrator console or the admin panel of Microsoft 365. It's not possible. The reason is simple. The reason is because based on his job role, he is limited with certain things that he or she can do in organization. So as a front desk person, he or she has the role that he or she plays in organization, right? The same thing, if you pick up an IT support engineer, IAM engineers, as a security person, all those guys will have permission to enter into the IDF or check the server room to look at whatever is going on in organization, right? So this is for this person. Let's say the company hires more people. The company hire more administrators. How are we going to implement this? Let's say the company hire more network engineers and they are all going to use AWS to work. How are we going to go with this? All right. So now we have here network engineers. These are very beautiful people. And when you look at all these network engineers here, you can see something here that the first person here, there is a policy. There's a policy that is attached to this person, to the first person, but the rest don't have policies, and that is a very very tedious job to do, because if the first person have this policy and all these guys are network engineers, now I have to go ahead and then attach these policies to the second person, to the third person, fourth, all to the last person, which is very tedious job to do. So for example, let's say, because these people are just, let me see, this is 8 people, so this is 5, 6, 7, 8, yeah, 8 people. But what about if the network engineers, if they were like, let's say 20 people or 25 people? That means that you have to be attaching the policy to them, permission to them now. So RBAC here then solves the problem. So what you do is that first, you have the network engineers. They all have common responsibility. So based on the definition that I first had, so they are going to do actually the same thing. They have common responsibility, right? They are all network engineers, fine gentlemen, fine ass women here. They are all network engineers that a company just hired, and you're going to do exactly the same thing on AWS. So what you're going to do is that, first of all, you need to create a group called the network engineers group, right? And then you assign all of them to the network engineer group, the network engineers group. Then the next thing they're going to do is that you're going to create a policy. So you create a policy and then you create a rule. So you create a policy and then you attach the policy or the permissions to the role, and the role is going to be the network. Sorry, I should have brought it. So the role is going to be the network admin role, the network engineers role, or however you want to call it. So this is going to be the network admin permission or policy, and then you're going to attach it to the group. So what is going to happen is that every network engineer in the group on AWS is going to assume this particular permission and then perform certain functions on AWS. This is very simple, right? So the next thing here is that, let's say you have these 2 people, and these 2 people were part of the network engineers, but you were like, wait, I want these 2 people to perform a different task. So I'm giving them a role, and I'm going to call this role the network administrators. So these guys are going to be the network, and they're going to be network administrators in the organization. So what I'm going to do is that I also don't have to create permissions and then attach the permissions to them individually. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a network administrator group, just like what I've done, and then I'll go ahead and attach. I'll give them the network admin role. So I'll create a network administrator group and then attach this policy to the group. So the 2 of them are going to perform exactly the same function. So they're going to pick up the policy whenever they go on AWS to perform certain duties, right? So how does RBAC work? So RBAC works based on it works on the principle of least privilege, right? And the principle of least privilege helps to ensure sensitive data security. And using RBAC can be extremely helpful for a larger enterprise with a great number of employees, where administrators are facing difficulties in assigning unique user credentials to each employee. With automated role-based access control, administrators can create user groups with similar permissions and rights, assign roles and responsibilities, and allows access to a defined set of resources. So like what I explained earlier, like the company has a larger base employees. It is very difficult for IAM engineers or IAM managers to be creating individual user access credentials. So what you do is that you can use RBAC, you can implement RBAC policy, and then you go ahead and then create roles or create groups and create a policy, attach the policy to the group so that you can assign the users to the group, and then they can go ahead and assume those permissions and do the job that's been given to them, right? So basically, for example, let's say you have the network engineers, and then you also have, let's say, the marketing group, and then you have, let's say, the help desk group. Now each of these group have their own permissions that they perform in organization. So one, you can see that the network engineer group, they are able to they have the S3 bucket permissions policy, so they can go ahead and then get access points in S3, list access points, list jobs, get bucket cups, list bucket. When you look at the marketing group too, they have only one. So when you look at the marketing group here, they have only one permission, that is to get object in S3. This is where the principle of least privilege comes in. Now I'm going to explain the principle of least privilege, but I just want to chip in here. Now the principle of least privilege states that you give the minimum access or the minimum privilege to users or to a user to perform certain function. So if the user is not going to use those permissions, there's no need of giving those permissions to the user. And I think this is very understandable. So as an IAM engineer or as an IAM manager, whenever you are creating permissions for users in organization or users on AWS or employees on AWS, what you're going to do is that you need to look at what are they going to do, what resources are they going to have access to. For example, if they're going to have access to S3 or they're going to have access to EC2 instance, you need to define what they can do on what they can do with the permissions, with the EC2 permission that is going to be given to them. So you don't give them the full access to EC2 instance, but you define what they are supposed to do. And I think that as an IAM manager, that is our job. We make sure that the users that are going to perform certain functions on EC2, they have what they are supposed to have, and we implement the principle of least privilege to define what they can do and what they cannot do on AWS, right? The same thing also with the help desk group. So this is the meaning of the principle of least privilege, and I got this definition from CyberArk, and it says that the principle of least privilege is a security concept in which a user is given the minimum levels of access or permissions needed to perform a job, like what I just explained. So when you look at this IAM policy here, this is IAM policy, you can see that it has a lot of permissions here: list SSH public keys, list group for users, list group policy, list attached group policy. It has the resources, and then you also come down, you can see other permissions also there. But with all this policy, you don't give this policy or these permissions to users to perform. You look at what those users want to do. So for example, let's say you want the users to be able to list access keys or list MFA devices on AWS. That is the minimum permission that you give to those users. You don't give all the other permissions to them. No, if they only need to list MFA devices on AWS, what you need to do is to give them only that permission, the permission to list MFA devices on AWS, and that will solve the problem. And doing this will help protect certain sensitive data on AWS. All right, so let's look at the importance of RBAC. So one, RBAC decreased risk of breaches and data leakage, and is very true. Whenever you implement RBAC, it means that you are restricting access to certain sensitive information, and because of that, it's going to reduce the potential for data breaches or data leakage, so that people who are not supposed to have access to certain resources on an organization cannot leak certain information out to the public, right? So easily audit user privileges and correct identified issues. So whenever you want to do audit, so let me bring Microsoft privilege access management here. So whenever you are working on Microsoft Azure, one of the things that you do is that sometimes you have to give certain privileges to some people. When you give certain privileges, we have times you can create a time on Azure that, okay, on this particular time you want to do what we call audit. So you can do audit or you can do review. So like whenever you create a privilege access management and then you give a role to a person on Microsoft Azure, you can set up the time frame where you want the person to use that particular role or that particular So for example, let's say you give the developer role to somebody on Microsoft Azure. You can specify the number of days that person should use that role. So when you put in that role, when the time is up, what is going to happen is that the privilege access management is going to send a notification, because whenever you are configuring that, you are going to put in your email. So it's going to send a notification to the administrator that this person's the date or the date that was set for this person to use this particular role is about to expire. When that happens, you, the administrator, you can go and then do what we call a review. So you can review the role, look at what the person what the person did. Is it exactly the same thing that the person used the role to perform the function on Microsoft Azure? So that is one thing. So here, all these user privileges, yes. So RBAC helps a lot. Then this is more on Microsoft Azure, because Microsoft Azure, you have I think it gives you the opportunity to do audit. It gives the opportunity to review the roles that have been assigned to users, and you can set certain dates for that, and then you can receive notification in your inbox that certain roles is about to expire. So you can go ahead and then do a review. If the person hasn't finished the job, then you can continue and extend the date. So I don't have my Azure tenant here. I will have shown you. So you can go ahead and then extend the month for the person. The person can go ahead and then use it, right? So the next thing is that it enhances compliance. Yes, every organization must comply with local, state, and federal regulations. Companies generally prefer to implement RBAC systems to meet the regulatory and statutory requirement for confidentiality and privacy. So as executives and IT department can more effectively manage how the data is accessed and then used. And this particular is very important for financial institutions, and also for health organizations too, because those people manage more sensitive data. All right. So now I'm done with the slide, with the presentation. I'm going to go on AWS and then show you this, what I just explained to you. And I'm going to explain more on the AWS, right? So here, okay. So this is my AWS console. This is my IAM dashboard, right? And then you can see on top here, I don't know if you can see it, but on top here, I'm using an account named Matilda. So as AWS security person, one of the security best practices that AWS has suggested for organization is that you should never use your root account to do anything. You should never create users or configure EC2 instance using your management account or using your root account. No. So what you do is that you create an IAM user, and then you give the IAM user the administrator access so that the person can perform the certain function. That's one of the security best practices on AWS. So you never do anything in your root account. All right. So when you look here, this is my IAM dashboard. So I'm using the Matilda account, and a Matilda account. So when you come to the users here, I'm going to show you something right quick. You can see that Matilda is a user. Matilda has permissions, and here she has the administrator access. And then when you open up the administrator access, you can see that here in the JSON test here, you can see that Matilda is allowed to perform any function on any resource in organization. So the star here simply means any, and those stars means any. So Matilda account here can perform anything on the AWS. So I think that is how you do it. So you create an IAM user, you give the person administrator access role, and the person is able to perform certain functions instead of using the root account, right? Okay, so now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a role, right? But before I create a role, I'm going to create a policy, just like the slide. What are they? So like this person here, right? I'm going to create a policy and attach the policy to the role, and then attach the role to the user, right? So that's what I'm going to do. So the first thing is that I go here to policy, and then I'm going to implement what we call the principle of least privilege. So the role, this is a policy. So these are the different policies here, right? So I'll come to create policy, click on create policy. Then here it says select a service. So I want the person to have access to IAM. So I'll click on IAM. I'll come to list, and then I'll click on list rows. So list rows simply means that I want the person to be able to list rows in IAM. So as you can see here, info, when you click on information, it is going to give you the meaning of it. So it says grant permissions to list the IAM rules that have the specified path preference, right? Perfect. So now I want him to also be able to list MFA devices. When you come to read, I want him to be able to get policy, to be able to get user, and to be able to, I think that is okay. Then when you come to the right permissions, I want him to be, I want him to change password, but I don't want him to create an access key. And I'm going to show you what this person can do. So delete a group now. So I can go ahead to, you see here it says add more permissions. So I can go ahead and then add more permissions, and this one is going to be S3. Now look at S3. I can go ahead here and say the list. The person is able to list bucket, but that will be the only thing that the person is going to do. So that's the policy. I'll go ahead and say next, and I'll say I'll call this, let's say, the admin role policy. So it's called the admin role policy, right? I'll go ahead and create this policy. Great. So now you can see that you cannot find it here. So what you need to do is that when you type admin, you see that it shows up as the fourth item here. So admin role policy. When I click on the plus sign here, it's going to show you the list, what the permission, what the person can do here, right? Okay, so now after creating this policy, the next thing is that I need to go ahead and create a role. So I'll come to roles, and I'll click on create role, AWS services. The next thing is that it's going to be on EC2. All right, so no. Okay, let me just pick the EC2. Then the next thing is that I'll just go ahead and then click on next. Here, I have to search for the policy, the permission that I just created, which is the admin role policy. So what I'm doing is that I'm going to attach the policy to the role, right? To admin role policy. I'll go ahead and click on next, and I'm going to name the role. So the role is going to be admin. Let me say, name it. Let's say developer. Let me call it. Is it developer? Shall I even call it developer? Let me call the developer role. Okay, perfect. So this is going to be the developer role, and then here it has a trusted policy here. The next thing is that you can see that here the permissions, as you can see, the permission is here. The admin role policy permission is here. I can go ahead and then create this role. Now I have the developer role. So when I scroll down a little bit here, I should see, because these are the roles I've created. Now this is the developer role that I've just created. So now what I'm going to do is that I can click on this role here, and then I can see the policy here. I can click on the policy and I can see the policy here. Great. The next thing is that I can, if I want to add more permissions to it, I can come here and attach a different policy to it. Right, but that's not what I'm trying to do today. So now I have this here. The next thing that I need to do is that I need to go ahead and then go to users and come to James. I click on James. James already have this permission. Let me go ahead and then remove this permission. Removed. So now you can see that I have James here. James doesn't have any policy or any permission attached to his name. So what I can do is that I can come to add permissions here, the first one, add permissions, and then I'll go ahead and then pick the third one. So here it says add user to a group. No, copy permissions. No, attach policy directly. So I'll go ahead and then attach policy. So here I'm going to search for the permission that the policy that I created, which is called the admin role policy. So you can see that here we have the admin role policy. Great. So I have this here. I can go ahead and click on next and then add permissions. So you can see that this James here, this is his account. He has this admin role policy, and that is all that I want James to have. Now if I decide to create, so okay, let's have this one here. When I come to users, I can decide to create a new user, and then I'm going to call this user let's say Rosalind, and then provide user access to the AWS Management Console. Yes. So I can go ahead and then say that specify the person that create a person IAM password. So I can go ahead and then create a password for the user. User might create a new test. No, I don't want users to create a new password. So I can go ahead and then create a password for this user. All right. The next thing is that I'm going to click on next. Then this user has been created, but now it's asking me to set permissions for this user. So I can go ahead and then attach policy, that is the permission directly. So here you can see that it also have the admin role policy here. I can go ahead and then go to next and then create a user. So this is going to be creating a new user, and the name of the user is Rosalind. Right. Great. So now let me return to user list. It's not important. Okay. So that is one. So now let me go ahead and then open incognito window. And then, but before that, I need to copy. So where is James? So we just created Rosalind. Right. Where's Rosalind? Is Rosalind. So we can go ahead and copy the IAM ID, and then we can come here and then open a new incognito window and then search for AWS console and open AWS console, come to sign in, and then I'll sign in as IAM user. I'll place the account ID here, hit next, and then our name, I'll put down Rosalind, and I'll put in her password. So sign in. Perfect. So you know the permission that I gave to this person. After that, I'm going to delete the user. So okay, so now let's say Rosalind want to create a user. Right, let me go ahead and then open up IAM, or let me go then pick S3. So let's say Rosalind pick up S3. Let's see what is going to happen here. So I did not give so much permissions to her. So I'm going to click on create S3 bucket, name bucket to be 1, 2, 3, leave everything as it is, and then create a bucket. Okay, oh, that's already been taken. So 022. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. So it's gonna be KK0112. Oh, 1, 2, 3, 45. KK. All right. So now let's create this bucket. So look at what happened here. So it says that what failed to create bucket. To create a bucket, the S3 create bucket permission is required, which is good. So which means that it's working. So yes, so whenever you create a user and then you define you implement the RBAC policy, this is what is going to happen. So this person, Rosalind here, cannot create a bucket because I did not give her the bucket policy to create a bucket. When I look at the policy again here, you see that here it says that what list roles, right? Okay, so let's go back to the Cognito, the browser again. Then let's go to IAM, pick IAM, and then so immediately I got in here. You see what it's saying. So access denied. You don't have permissions to get account summary. You don't have any permissions to list access keys, everything. So yes, this is really good. But when you look at the permission here, it says that what list rows. So let's see if she can list the rows. So when I come to rows, yes, she's able to list the rows, right? But let's see if she can create a user. So it says that you don't have permissions to IAM list users. So yes, so she cannot even list users because she doesn't have the permission to do that, right? But immediately I go ahead and then define this policy, right? If I decide to define this policy, then she can have access to it. Okay, so now I'm going to delete this user though. Yeah, the next thing is that I can go ahead and create a group and then attach the group to the user, to users, like assign users to the group and then attach the policy to the users. That is also really good. So for example, let's say we have the user group. I can go ahead and create a group and call this group, I'm going to call this group, let's say reporters. So this group is called reporters, the reporters group. So here you can see that I say that attach permission policy. So I can go ahead and say that, well, I'm going to give these people, this group, let's say this particular permissions, and I'm at an Amazon API Gateway Administrator. I can go ahead and give this a Amazon Athena full access. I'll go ahead and then create group. Now, when I created this group, this is the group. So this group has, when you come to users, currently I haven't added any user to this group, but when it comes to permissions, you can see that they have the Amazon API Gateway Administrator. They have the Amazon Athena full access, so that they can, and when you open this thing up, you can see what that permission is. So they can list bucket, get bucket location, list S3 bucket, and a whole lot of stuff, right? So you can see here now when I come to users, but before that, let me go to users here and then look for Rosalind. I'm going to delete Rosalind permissions here, the policy that I gave and the permission I gave here. So currently Rosalind doesn't have any permission. So when I come to user groups here, I look for reporters. Now in here I can come to permissions and then look at these two permissions. You can see that it has the API Gateway Administrator here, full API gateway administrator, when you come to the Amazon Athena full access, here you can see that the person is allowed to do a whole lot of stuff here, even in the S3. So the person can create bucket. You can see that there's a create bucket here. So now I can go ahead here, come to users, and then on here on the right side here, I can add users to it. So I'm going to look for Rosalind. So this is going to be Rosalind. Add Rosalind to it. Now, when I come to Rosalind's account, you see here, I can go to S3. At first, she could not create any bucket in S3, right? But now, let's go ahead and create bucket. We name this bucket Ros 0211. And then we're not going to do anything, we're just going to leave everything as it is, and then we're going to create bucket. It still says that what? To create a bucket, the S3 create bucket permission is required. Perfect. So now let's go ahead, let's come here, come to permissions. We have the Amazon Athena full access here. So now when you look at the permission here, the create S3, okay, perfect. So just a minute, let me go ahead. No, let me bring this thing up a little bit again. Let me refresh this page. It's gonna ask me to create again ROS 6669 and then create a bucket. It still failed. Yes. Let's look at the reason why it's still failing. Okay. So when I come to ROS users, let's look for Rosalind here. So you can see that Rosalind here has this Amazon Athena full access permission, but I don't know. Okay, so this is it. So this is basically for Amazon Athena. All right, but when I go here and I add permissions here, let me go and search for, let's attach policy and search for S3. So we have the Amazon S3 full access, Amazon S3 read only access. So I can click on Amazon S3 read only access. So this one is an S3 policy. The other one was the Amazon Athena policy, right? So I added to it. Now when I come to Rosalind here, the read only access, let's see, create a bucket. Let's see why it's not responding. Hold on, let me refresh this page again. Let me see if the permission I gave her is still not. All right, let's create this bucket. Okay, so she still doesn't have access to this. All right, so let's go back here again. I give a read only access, right? So let me go ahead and then remove this, but we can look at the policy. So here you can see that, yeah, the reason why she's not able to create the bucket is because here he can get bucket, list bucket, describe bucket, object, or lambda get, lambda list. That is the only thing that she can do. So when I go here and I remove this one, and then I come here and then add permission again, and then I look for attach policy, look for S3. So we have S3 full access, and then, or for example, instead of giving her a full access, I can decide to create an inline policy, and then I'll look for S3 here. And what I'm going to do is that with the S3, she's going to only create bucket, right? So go ahead and then click next, resources, and then click next, and it's going to be create bucket in S3. All right, to create this policy, now she has this this policy, this permission here, create bucket in S3. Now let's go back to her account, and then let's see if this is going to work. Definitely it has to work. Yes. So now so now she has been able to create the bucket, but you can see it says that what she has insufficient permission, so she doesn't have a lot of permissions to do a lot of stuff on S3. But what I wanted her to do was to create a bucket, and yes, and now she's been able to create a bucket. So I can go on and then delete this bucket. All right, so let's see if she can even delete bucket. So now you can see that here she doesn't have the delete bucket because that is not part of it. So what I can do here is that I did not add that permissions to it. So I can come here and then define this policy. So that is it. So she can only create bucket. Let me see if I can another action. Let me see, hold on. So I can come here again and then create an inline policy and look for S3 and then search for right. So here create bucket, and then you have to look for delete bucket. So here is delete bucket. Go to next. Okay, yeah. Go to next and then name this S3 C and D policy. I mean, create and delete bucket. So I'll go ahead and create this policy, and I'll delete the create bucket S3 policy. I'll just take it out from there. Now when I come to her here, I can go ahead and refresh this page, and let's see if she can delete the bucket. So hold on, let's go back and then click this delete. She still cannot delete the bucket. Okay, so what is happening here? Let's go back here and look at this policy that was created. Oh no, let me click this. So S3 delete buckets, S3 create bucket, yes. So yeah, so now where's her? Let me just bring her here. All right, so she cannot delete the bucket. So what I can do here is that I can come back here and then just give her a full S3 Amazon S3 full access, and then go ahead and click next and add permissions to her, and then I can go ahead and then remove this policy. So now Rosalind has this. I can come in here and then refresh this. This should go. Yes. So now she has all the authority. It said that what deleting the bucket cannot be undone. So what I can do is just copy this, the name of the bucket, paste it here, and then delete this bucket. All right, then after that, after she's done with this, I can go and then revoke the access, just take off there, delete this policy from her. All right, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that I was talking about the group. So you can see that here I created a reporters group, and in the reporters group we have one user here, right? I can attach another policy here. So let's say attach a policy, and that is going to be for, let's say, is it IAM? Let me search for IAM. Yes. So we have the IAM read only access, so I can attach this policy. So we have the Amazon Athena full access, IAM read only. Let me just go in and then remove this one from here. So remove this one here. And we have only one policy that is attached to this group So when I come here, I can come and then add user. Let me add Hugh and then James to it. Add users. Perfect. So you can see here I have Hugh, James, and then Rosalind as part of the reporters group. When I come to users here and I look for James, you can see that here the policy is appearing in James account. So now James here have the access to read IAM, have the permissions to do some stuff on IAM. And you can see that it says here that it was attached via the group reporter. So the group reporter, so it's showing, and this is really good. Amazon gives you the opportunity to see how James got this particular permission. So whenever you are doing the auditing, you can see that, okay, yes, here the reason why James is having this policy is because the policy was attached to James via the group, via the reporters group. So it becomes more easier to do auditing. So yes, so that is it. So these are the rules. I can go ahead and create a rule. Like I said, I think I already did create a rule. So let me go ahead and then cancel this one. So these are the rules that I've already created. I have the developers role here that I created, so I can go ahead and then attach the admin role policy. So anybody, if I assign this role to anybody, the person will then go ahead and then assume this particular role and then have the permissions to do how I've specified the permission in here. Yes, so that's one of the things that that is how the RBAC works on AWS. So at the end of the day, you give you implement the principle of least privilege on AWS, and then it becomes more easier for you to manage your users. It becomes more easier in case you want to do auditing, or in case you want to in case you want to audit some permissions, because that particular policy is attached to, let's say, a role. You can go ahead and then open up the policy, and then if you want to edit this policy, you can go ahead and then edit the policy. I'm just going to wait for so you can go ahead and then edit this policy if you don't want this person to get users. You can go ahead and then edit this policy, and then go to next, and then you can save the changes. And then that is when you are doing auditing, maybe like you want to do some modification with the policy, and then yes, it will still apply to the role. So anybody who is part of this role, or who has been assigned this role as a developer and the developer role, if the person comes with admin role policy, you can see that the get user has been removed just because I did a modification on the role. So yes, if you're working as an IAM engineer, as an IAM manager, that's one of the things that you can do whenever you are managing a lot of people. So this is how you can implement RBAC on AWS. If you like this video, I want you to go ahead and then give it a thumbs up, and then subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much. How many minutes? 1 hour. That is crazy.
So today I'm going to share a video to show you how to implement RBAC on AWS. It's going to be a very short video. I know that RBAC is a